Okay, so first of all, thank you for joining. I hope you're enjoying the summer. Traditionally at Chabad Greenwich, we do a little Kabbalah in the summer. So I guess we're keeping the tradition alive. So thank you, and thank you for joining. I can't really see everybody on the screen because I'm on the phone, but if you have any questions, please chime in, right? Don't wait for the end. Come in, let us know. Just a little introduction of what we're doing and why we're doing it. So the title, of course, is the Kabbalah of Angels. But that wouldn't be enough, because what do I care about what's going on with the angels? So the idea is, what is the relevance to us? And as we're going to show in Judaism, surprisingly, even though we don't think about angels so often, but once you start looking at the liturgy, at the prayers, there's a surprising amount of reference to angels. And the question is, what do I need to know about them? And more, what are they doing there? What are they? Okay, that's more of informational, but more important from the perspective of Judaism, where everything has to have a practical application. What do I care about the angels? What do I care about the songs they sing to God in heaven, as described by the prophets and as recorded in our prayers? So that's really what we want to think about. What are they? Why are they important? And why are they important to us? And why do they take up such prominent space in Jewish liturgy, in the prayers? And I'm just going to show you one or two samples of where every single day, every single day, 365 days a year, and sometimes more, we are talking about the angels, talking about the songs of the angels. And that again is I've never seen one, I've never seen an angel, but what does it got to do with me? So that's where the Hasidic and Kabbalistic insights come in, and they give us some insight of what angels are and how we relate to them and what they mean to us and why we're spending so much time talking about them. So that is, I guess, by way of introduction. So I can't share the screen because I'm on the phone, it's a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to read from the prayer book. And different prayer books have slightly different versions, but every prayer book has this blessing in it that is supposed to be said, like I said, every single day of the year. So you have the Shema. Shema is the biblical commandment to say, to read the passage of Shema in the Torah, which is the declaration of the unity of Hashem and the commandment to love God, etc. But then the sages said, before we say the Shema, we need to prepare. We need to have preparation. And to get us in the mood for the Shema, and to get us in the proper motivation, we discussed this, that according to the Kabbalah and Hasidism, meditation is important. But what do we meditate about? Okay, so what we're going to meditate about, there's two themes. There's the first blessing and the second blessing. The first blessing of preparation to the Shema talks about different themes, but a lot of them is about angels. I'm holding the Chabad prayer book. It's on page 40, but every prayer book is going to have this page or two before the Shema. I'm just going to read a little bit. Be eternally blessed, our rock, our king, and our redeemer, referring to God, who creates holy beings. Praise be your name forever, our King, who creates ministering angels, and whose ministering angels all stand in the heights of the universe and proclaim in awe, aloud in unison, the words of the living God and sovereign of the universe. All of them are beloved, all are pure, all are mighty, all are holy, and all perform the will of their maker with fear and awe. Okay, etc. I'm skipping a full paragraph. Finally, we say, okay, we get to the point. What do these angels do all day? Here we go. All exclaiming in unison with awe and a clear in reverence, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. So that's one group of angels. Then we continue, and the Ophanim and the Holy Chayot, other groups of angels, with a mighty sound rise toward the Seraphim, and facing them offer praise and say, blessed be the glory of the Lord from his place. And we continue. In other words, every single day in our prayers, we mention and we talk about the songs that the angels sing to God. Now, why do I need these songs that the angels sing to God? Why? We have enough creativity on planet Earth that you can hire a few people to write a few songs to God, maybe hire King David or someone of the like, and you just hire a few people, hire someone to write a song. Why do we need to plagiarize from the angels is essentially the question. What do they have that we don't have? Okay, so that is one reference. I'm just going to say one more reference that we say on Shabbat, where we actually try to include ourselves with the angels. So again, I'm just going to read a line or two, but just to get us in the spirit of things here. I'm actually holding a prayer. I'm actually holding a book, a weekday book, not a Shabbat book. So I'll go to another prayer. And the prayer goes something like this. It's in the Amidah when the Chazan repeats the prayer. We say as follows. We say, we will hallow and adore you as the sweet words of the assembly of the holy seraphim who thrice repeat holy unto you, as it is written by your prophet, and they call one to another and say, holy, holy, holy. In other words, we're saying to God that we down here on this earth are going to sing to you just like the angels sing in heaven. And on Shabbat, we actually elaborate upon this theme. We're all singing together and the beauty of our song and their song, and it's all wonderful. Okay, so that's just by way. So if you never heard about angels, okay, because in Judaism, it's not emphasized so much in the rituals, but in the prayer, they're all over the place. So that's enough for us to stop and say, what are they? What are they doing here? Why are they important? What is their relevance to me, especially if the Torah seems to be, the prayer book seems to say, oh, that yes, you're supposed to be singing their songs, which means you should be connecting to them and thinking about what they're thinking about. Okay, so that's the roadmap. That's the roadmap for today and maybe next week as well. So what do we have? That's introduction number one. Let's do one more introduction. Generally speaking, before we even get into the details of the discussion here, according to the Kabbalah, there are multiple spiritual worlds, and every spiritual world is another awareness. In other words, when you talk about spiritual worlds, you don't mean something that's connected to space, to physical space. So the Kabbalah says there are 4 spiritual worlds. It doesn't mean that you got to take a space shuttle to go to the first world and then go to the second world. No, that's physical, right? When we say there's a spiritual world, means there's a spiritual space that transcends physical space, and it's an awareness. And when you say there's 4 spiritual worlds in general, there's 4 different types of awareness. So in a sense, what we say when we talk about an angel, we're saying there is a created being that has a completely different awareness than the awareness that we have in this world, because we're creatures of this world. So our awareness is affected by our physicality and by the dimensions of physicality, which is our universe as we know it. But then there are spiritual worlds, and spiritual worlds is other different spiritual perspectives. And every spiritual world has the creations of those worlds which share and identify with the perspective of those worlds. So when I say angel, what do I really mean? I really mean there is a certain spiritual perspective. There is a spiritual creation that has a spiritual perspective. And therefore, when we say, well, it's important for us to understand and connect and sing their songs, what we're really trying to say is we want to adapt some of their awareness. Could we connect to their awareness? They have an awareness that we don't have. But if we sing their song, maybe we could connect to them in a spiritual sense and develop within ourselves or cultivate within ourselves some of that awareness. So that's really the big picture. So what we're going to try to do is look at the texts. Going back to the prayer book is really taking it from the prophets. That's how we know what the angels are singing. So we want to look at the original sources. We want to look at what the prophets say the angels are singing. We want to understand what they're singing. And you'll see later there's at least 3 groups. There's all different types of angels, but we're going to talk about at least 3 groups. Each one says something slightly different. And we want to understand what is their awareness. And then more importantly, how are we going to connect it to our own life and our own awareness and our own meditation. So that's the roadmap. Unfortunately, we need another introduction before we start. I need a few introductions. There is a beautiful verse in the prophets that says as follows. The prophet Zechariah, and Zechariah, without getting into the whole his personality and his life and when he lived in the beginning of the Second Temple, without getting into this whole book. It's I think 3 chapters. there is a verse in his prophecy where God is talking to him and there are angels there. And God says like this, you're going to walk amongst all those standing here. Meaning there's the angels who stand, and you, Zechariah, you, the prophet, you're going to walk. You're going to be you're going to have the spiritual sensitivity that you can walk where the angels stand firm. That's the verse. The Kabbalah talks about this verse and says that this verse is actually much more telling than you think it is. In other words, it's not talking about Zechariah. It's talking about the difference between the human being and angels. And the way we classify human beings is creations that walk. The way we classify angels is beings that stand still. What do I mean? So the angels, based on what we said till now, the angels possess a spiritual awareness. That spiritual awareness is so clear and so crystallized to the angels that it doesn't change. It's not challenged. So what are they? Every day they're experience the same awareness. They experience the same emotion, which derives from that awareness. They have no mood swings. They have no bad days, and they stand still. And they could have a very intense awareness of God and a very intense love and awe of God, wonderful, but whatever it is, it's stationary because they're not living in a world of confusion, of concealment, of temptation, right? So they stand still. Now, the human beings, quoting that verse from Zechariah, we walk. We're never still. We're never in one place. We have ups and downs. We have good days. We have bad days. Even if we cultivate a spiritual awareness that could last 10 minutes and then 10 minutes later, we're worrying about something else. Now, on the surface, it seems like that's the advantage of the angels. Look, they're committed. They stand still. They're consistent. They don't move. Everything is beautiful. But no, the Kabbalah says they're stuck in their place. What we really want is movement. What God wants movement. What's much more valuable is not what level of spiritual awareness you have, but the idea that you have to fight to develop it, the idea that you grow, the idea that you're not stationary, right? So perfection is for pictures than for angels. Human beings are not perfect, but they're more beautiful. And that's the idea that we're going to hope to cultivate a little bit of the awareness of the angels. That doesn't mean the angels are greater than us. To the contrary, that could mean the angels are more perfect than us, but God is not looking for perfection. God is looking for movement. So we're not here idealizing the angels. We want to take from their awareness, bring it into our life, and help us become mehalchim, help us to become people who move, people who grow. And that in that sense, the fact that we can be a little bit angelic in this world is far more valuable than the angels who, yes, they may have an intense spiritual awareness, but they didn't have to cultivate it. They didn't have to fight for it. They don't have to maintain it. They're exactly the same every single day. They're a computer. They're a machine. They're not a human being. We are human beings. We move, we change, we develop, and that is where the true value lies. Okay, that's all by way of introduction. So I made a few introductions, just generally speaking. The introductions were that we have the angels. The angel represents a spiritual awareness. We want to understand what is that spiritual awareness. And then we want to talk about how do we cultivate that spiritual awareness within ourselves. So this is, again, not a comprehensive statement about anything we could say about angels, but this is just sort of, I think, at least for today, putting out the parameters of the discussion. If you have any other questions or comments about angels and you want to raise it now, please do. If you want to raise it at the end of the class, you can do that as well, and we can talk about it next week. But this is what I think I want to focus on, and I hope you will benefit from it. And like me, strive to be a little bit more angelic. Strive to cultivate a little bit more of the angelic perspective. Again, it's not me. It's what Judaism tells us and what the prayer books tell us. Okay, so that's by way of introduction. Before we start, we need a story because it's a beautiful day and 10:20 in the morning. We need a story. So this is a story you may have heard before. So I'm going to say it very briefly. The story is like this. Once upon a time, if you read Jewish literature, it says that, some people who are very intensely spiritual, they can merit to experience the revelation of Elijah the prophet. Who's Elijah the prophet? Well, he was a prophet, then he becomes an angel. And according to Judaism, he comes to, every Passover Seder. We have the cup of Elijah. He comes to every circumcision. Okay. But we don't see him. We're physical beings. He's a spiritual being. So finally, the mystics write all kinds of ways where you can, be intensely spiritual, don't talk for 40 days, immerse yourself in study and prayer, and then you can experience the revelation of Elijah the prophet. So the story is told about a gentleman who really, really wants to experience Elijah the prophet. He everything else on his bucket list he already did. The only thing left on his bucket list is to see Elijah. So he goes to his teacher, the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, and he says, I have a problem. He says, I followed all the instructions in the Kabbalistic texts, and I did not see Elijah the prophet. So the Baal Shem Tov said, look, okay, fine, I'll tell you what to do. What you should do is you should go for Rosh Hashanah, travel to this address in this town, and if you're there for 48 hours of Rosh Hashanah, a good chance you'll see Elijah. This man was a very wealthy man. So he travels in style. He's got all his horse and wagon full of provisions for the holiday, shows up to the town, and he cannot find the address. Long story short, it's a little hut at the end of town. He shows up, he comes in there, he knocks on the door, and a woman opens up. She says, can I come in for the holiday? She says, look, you're welcome to come in, but I'm a widow, and we have orphans, and I'm poor. I have nothing to give you. He says, don't worry, I got all the food we need. I'm going to come and I'm going to celebrate. So he shows up, and he's there for the holiday, and everyone's eating and drinking and being festive, and he staying up all night looking out the windows. Maybe Elijah is going to come, maybe Elijah is not going to come. Long story short, holiday is out. There's no Elijah the prophet. He goes back to his Rebbe, goes back to his teacher, and he says, I went there, there's no Elijah the prophet. He says, you sure you were there? This address? Yeah, you sure you looked around, you didn't see Elijah? He says, no. Okay. He says, you know what? Go back for Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, before Yom Kippur, you don't eat, but you have to eat the day before Yom Kippur. There's a big mitzvah to eat a big meal right before the fast day. So he fills up his wagon again, all kinds of foods and drinks and food and everything, and he's all ready for Yom Kippur. And he heads out to the address, and he shows up in front of the house, and he's climbing the stairs, and he's about to knock on the door, and he hears the children asking their mom, and he says, Mom, what are we going to eat before Yom Kippur? We have no food. So she says, don't worry. She says, God sent us Elijah the prophet before Rosh Hashanah. He'll send us Elijah the prophet before Yom Kippur. And I guess the point of the story is that if you don't see Elijah, then you should be Elijah. And it's a similar idea. But again, a prophet, an angel is an awareness. An angel is a sensitivity to certain truths. And we hope to cultivate some of that in our own life and in our own spiritual life and in our own spiritual journey. So now we got all the stories and all the jokes and all the introductions out of the way. Now we could start analyzing what exactly is happening here with the angels, who they are, what do they want from us, and what are they doing in our prayer book. Okay, so I'm going to read, trying to sign on my computer so I could share the screen, but if I can't, I'm just going to read it from my screen here. And what we're going to read, I'm going to read one or two texts. And the first text is going to be from the prophet Isaiah. And why am I reading this text? Because this text is really one of the sources, the earliest source for what the angels say, and all the references to the angelic songs in the prayer, they come from the prophets, and specifically from these few verses in Isaiah. So I'm reading Isaiah chapter 6. I don't remember what verses they are, but it's Isaiah chapter 6. Verse 1. Isaiah chapter 6. In the year of the death of King Uzziah, I saw the Lord sitting on a high and exalted throne. and his lower extremity filled the temple. So in other words, he's sitting low. God is sitting low on his throne. Seraphim literally means fiery creatures, comes from the word saraf, to be burnt up. His fiery creatures stood above of him. In other words, is God sitting, and above, he sees this image. We have no image of God, but that's the prophecy. So he sees the Lord sitting on high. So God is sitting. Above God are the angels. If you ever wanted to know what angels look like, here it goes. 6 wings to each one. With 2, he would cover his face, and with 2, he would cover his feet, and with 2, he would fly. Right? If you need to know angels, why do you need so many sets of wings? You have to cover your face, you have to cover your feet, and 2 to fly. Okay. And one called to the other and said, meaning one angel will tell the other angel, would call and say. Kara means to call, but also to elicit. And they would all say, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. So they're saying, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The Lord is holy. They say it 3 times. And then they say the whole earth is full of his glory. So that's the one that's really the most important statement that we take from our prayers about what the angels are saying. I mean, remember, what they're saying is essentially what their awareness is. So that is the verse in Isaiah. Then we go to another text, which is a text of the Talmud. And the Talmud elaborates upon this verse, and I'm not going to bring the whole section here, but in short, you're going to see that they're going to say that there's actually 3 groups of angels, and each one says something else. So I'm just going to read Talmud Chulin chapter, page 91b. As Rav Hananel said, that Rav said, 3 groups of ministering angels recite a song every day from the verse, holy, holy, holy is the Lord. One says holy, and the other one says holy. And the other one says, holy is the Lord of hosts. In other words, there's 3 groups. One says holy, because remember, the Isaiah's verse says, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. Now the Talmud says it's really 3 groups. One says holy, the other one says holy, and the other one says holy is the Lord of hosts. The Gemara amends Rav Hananel's statement without going. The Gemara says, the Talmud says that's a problem. It doesn't like this rendition. Without getting into that, what's the conclusion? The conclusion is the Gemara amends Rav Hananel's statement, citing Rav. Rather, Rav said that one group of ministering angels says holy, and another one says holy, holy, and the other one says holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. But that's what we really want to deal with. This is what we tried to get to. We have one verse that says holy, 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 but the Talmud says it's a little bit more complicated. In other words, specific. One group says holy, one group says holy, holy, and one group says holy, holy, holy. Okay. Now it's very cryptic. What does that mean? Why can't they all get along? Why can't they all say the same thing? So we're going to have to think about what does holy mean, and what does holy twice mean, and what does holy 3 times mean. And that's what we'll understand, what the 3 different groups of angels are, 3 different perspectives. And once we do that, we can start thinking about what is the meaning of the fact that there's different groups, and the different groups say different things. So now we have enough pieces of the puzzle that are laid out here. And what we have to do now is put the pieces of puzzle together so we can get our full picture. Okay. If the most important word that Isaiah says, that the angels say, which is the awareness of the angels, is holy. Okay, how many times? Isaiah says holy, holy, holy. And the Talmud says, well, one says holy, the other says holy, holy, the other one says holy, holy, holy. So what's the first question we want to ask? The first question we want to ask is, what is the meaning of holiness? What is the word holy mean? What does the word kadosh mean? Once we understand it, once we crack the code of that one word, then we can start figuring out what does it mean that there are multiple interpretations of this word, in other words, multiple times, and we can figure out how it applies to us and what the awareness of the angels are. But that's the real question of what is the word kadosh, what does the word holy mean? And this brings in a very general Kabbalistic concept, which appears in many areas of the Kabbalah and has tremendous ramifications. But we're going to try to get in a little bit and see what we can make of this. So the first thing we need to know about kadosh, about holy, is that in biblical Hebrew, the word kadosh, the word holy, really means, the etymology of the word, the definition of the word means separate and removed, or another word, designated. So you say something is holy, you mean it's designated, it's separate, it's not mundane, it's not common, it's separate for a holy cause. Now, what's interesting is that the Hebrew word kadosh, holy, does not have to mean designated for something good. It could also mean designated for something bad, right? So in biblical Hebrew, a harlot, either male or female, I don't know, so it's kadosh and kidesha, right? Because this is a person designated for promiscuity. So that it has the same word, which is holy. So all I'm trying to say is, when you say holy now, forget about what our connotations. Holy means, somebody all dressed in white, and I don't know, meditating. Okay, that too. But that's not what the root, the essence of the word is. Holy is removed and separate. So when the angels say God is holy, what they're really saying is God is removed and separate. What do they mean? So what they mean is as follows. The Kabbalah says like this. If you think about when one thing creates another thing, or one thing gives life to another thing, there's really two ways this can happen. And one metaphor would be the body and the soul, right? Everyone sees, you don't have to believe in the soul because you can see its effect. You see what there's life. There's the physical as component of the body, and then there's life. And life is intangible. But you know it's there. Even though you never saw it, you know it's there. How do you know it's there? Because you see someone who's alive, you see someone who's dead. What's the difference? They have the body is the same, the life is gone. You have, the Talmud says that sleep is like a 60th of death, one of 60 of death. Same thing. You have a person who's asleep. The body is fine, the heart is pumping, everything is fine, but they can't think, they can't speak. The spirituality is asleep. So in any case, when you have the body and the soul relating to each other, the soul is not removed from the body. In the Kabbalah, it's called hitlabshut. The soul is enclosed. It's wearing the body like a garment. And what are the ramifications? The ramifications are, if something happens to the body, the soul feels it. If you get hurt, what feels the body? Is it the body or the soul? What feels the pain? It's the soul feels the pain, right? If the body is cold, the soul can't think, right? Because the unity of the body and the soul for the time of the person that the person is alive is a fusion. And one is enclosed in the other, and one's grasped by the other, and they're basically deeply connected. That's what we call hitlabshut, where one thing is enclosed in something else. So what the angels are telling you, make no mistake, when God creates the world, when God is the source of life of all the worlds, it's not like the body that is enclosed in the world. Because for God is infinite. And from God's perspective, the world is too small and the world is not really significant. So it's not fair to say that God, the creator of the world, is really invested in the world like a soul is invested in the body. No. The metaphor would be what we would call or, which is light, right? You have the sun, which is an enormous ball of light, and the sun gives light to everybody. Does the sun care? I'm sitting in my room. Does the sun care if my window shade is open or closed? And if I close the window shade and I don't get the sun, will the sun be affected? No. The sun doesn't really care about me. In other words, the sun gives its light to everybody. Whoever wants to take it, can take it. You want to take it, take it. You don't want to take it, don't take it. The sun is not enclosed and related to each person who it is giving light to. And that's why the sun can give light to the entire solar system, whereas a soul can only give light to one person at a time. Soul can only give life to one person at a time because the soul is invested within the body. But the sun is not invested within the creation that the beings that receive its light. So that's the first thing we're going to say. We're going to say the light that Hashem, the light that God creates the world, is not enclosed within every creation. From God's perspective, it's called, in the Kabbalah, it's called Sovev Kolamin. It's the light that surrounds and encompasses the entire universe. It's like God would be like, the metaphor would be, God would be like the sun, which just gives out light. It doesn't really matter to the sun about the recipients. And that is much closer of an analogy of God's relationship with the world. It's like the sun, and the sun giving light to the creation, much more than the soul giving to the body. Because when the soul gives to the body, the soul is trapped and connected and fused with the body. So that's the first statement we have to understand. And that's what we mean when we say kadosh, holy. The angels sense that God is removed. Now we have to qualify this, because the Kabbalah says that it's not so simple. There is also a relationship between God and the world, the way the soul relates to the body. There is also an individualistic relationship. In addition to the level of light that emanates from God, which is called Sovev, encompassing light, encompasses the entire world and the entire universe as one. It's infinite. It's not bothered by the recipients. That's one model. But then there's another model. And the other model is called Memale, which is the light that enters within every creation to give it life. Because just like we have a soul, every creation needs a soul, and the soul is the divine energy. So which one is it? Is God totally removed from the world, or is God present and immanent within every creation? Which one is it? The answer is both. The infinite light of God is completely removed. However, there is a ray of light. If you think about the sun as an infinite amount of light, even though it's not infinite, but it's close to it. So if you think about the sun as an infinite amount of light, but one ray of the sun, one little ray of the sun, that would be the metaphor of a ray of the divine light that actually is enclosed within every creation and gives every creation its properties. And my personality is different than yours because the ray of God that enters me is different than the one that enters you. And we're both different than the table because the light that creates us is different than the light that creates the table. In other words, it's tailored to each creation. So that's what we call Memale Kolamin, the ray of God that's tailored toward the creation. And if the ray of God that's tailored toward the creation, then the creation is significant because it's invested in us and creating us. But what we're saying here is, make no mistake, that's only a ray of God's light. Compared to the infinite light of God, the infinite light of God, even when it creates, it's not tailored toward every creation, because creation itself is almost insignificant compared to it. That is the basic idea, the basic Kabbalistic idea of what we call Sovev Kolamin, the light that surrounds the world, and then the ray that's Memale, the ray that is tailored toward each creation. So, if I ask you a question, if I ask you a question, if I get hurt, does God care? If I scratch my toenail, does God care? Okay, this is a difficult question to answer because it's a tricky question. Does God care? So the ancient philosophers said, of course, God doesn't care. God is too great. Even if there's a God, God is too great. God is infinite. God doesn't care about what's happening with me. Is that true? Yeah, it sounds pretty convincing, because logically, why would God care? Then you have other people, many religions, the idea of religion is God is invested within the creation, and God is troubled by my own troubles. But if that's the case, then what? Then if I have a bad day, then God has a bad day? That's hard to say as well, right? If you're a parent and your child has a bad day, your day is ruined, right? So is that the same way? We control God in that way. If we have a bad day, then God has a bad day. So God is invested and trapped within us. We affect him. So what's the answer to that question? Is God affected by us or not? Is God affected when we have pain or not? Right? We said body, soul metaphor. The soul is affected when you have pain, when the body has pain. God. So the light metaphor, the sun doesn't care if I'm in a dark room and I didn't forget to open my window, right? Because it's just giving into infinite light, and whoever wants to receive it is welcome to receive it. So what's the relationship between us and God? Is God just giving us what we need, giving us a source of life? Or is God invested in this relationship and entangled with us to the extent that if we're not happy, he's not happy? So which one is it? So the short answer is it's both. In other words, it depends what you're looking at. It depends what part of godliness you're talking about. If you're talking about God's infinite light, he can't care. He's not invested. However, part of God, the ray, is invested. And the ray, when the ray of God is invested in us, and therefore, yes, when we suffer, that part of God does suffer. So the answer is we're having it both ways. On one hand, we say God is not affected by the universe. On the other hand, we say God is affected by the universe. How could it be both? Well, the encompassing light, the surrounding light, the infinite light is not affected by the universe. Think about the metaphor of the sun. The sun gives us light. It doesn't really care if you're here, if you're not here. But then there's a different form of life where if you really have to be tailored toward the recipient, right? If you're a teacher and you're just teaching and you have no idea if the people are listening to you, you're not being effective, right? So you need to invest yourself within this relationship. And the problem with that is that investing yourself within a relationship would also mean that you're vulnerable in the sense that if the relationship it doesn't really work out, you're affected, right? I can't be invested in a relationship without being invested. So God, on one hand, you say God is infinite. He's not changed. He's not moved by the universe. Forget about by an individual. He's not moved by the universe at all. He's giving a light, but he doesn't care. Like you think the sun is upset if there's clouds on this earth? Of course not. Now the sun doesn't have consciousness. But even if it did, that's not the point. The point is it's doing its thing. It's not tailoring its flow toward the recipient. Whereas other relationships is, yes, of course you have to be invested. And if you're invested, you're actually moved by it and affected by it. So which one is God? The answer is God is both. There's the infinite light of God, which is not affected by the world. Then there is the finite level of God, a ray of God, which is affected. Now, this is very important to understand these two levels because we're here to talk about the angels, which we'll get back to in the next few minutes. But we're going to talk about the angels in the next few minutes, but this concept is a universal, in other words, a fundamental concept within Kabbalah and Hasidism in general. We can talk about this concept as well because there's a lot of ramifications, but we're still focused on the angels, don't worry. So I'm going to read one more verse, which I didn't read before. I'm reading a verse again from the prophets. The prophet says like this, Malachi 3:6, "For I, the Lord, have not changed. And you, the sons of Jacob, have not reached the end." Okay, we'll talk about this is a quote. "For I, the Lord, have not changed." God doesn't change. Now, the simple meaning of this verse means that God doesn't change. God's ethics don't change. God's morals don't change. Rashi says it means God says, "I love goodness and I will always love goodness." God doesn't change. Without naming any names, there was somebody that was very, okay, I don't want to say this. I'll say it anyway because I started. Somebody was very committed to Judaism, and then they sort of, because of the environment, they stopped. So I asked him, what happened? He says, "My values changed." I didn't say anything, but to me, I was like, isn't that the point of values? That the values don't change, right? That's our anchor, but that's another story. So God is saying, my values don't change. What I love goodness, that doesn't change. It's not like God wakes up one morning and says, you know what, forget about goodness, we're going to go for cruelty, right? That's the simple meaning of the verse. But the Kabbalistic meaning of the verse is, God says, I have not changed. God, before God created the world, after God created the world, during the existence of the world, after the world will cease to exist, there's no change. And other parts of the prayer actually say that. You're the same before the world was created. You're the same after the world was created. God is not affected by the world. Why? Because he's infinite and we're insignificant. Something insignificant cannot affect infinity. So God really is not affected by this whole enterprise called creation. He creates, he's the creator, he's the source of everything, but he's not affected. That is the perspective from one perspective, the perspective of the light that surrounds, the infinite light. However, God also expresses himself in a finite way, a limited ray. That limited ray is tailored toward every creation. That relationship God is absolutely very affected by our relationship, and it affects us as well. Alejandro has a question. I'm just going to give one little metaphor, then we're going to take the question, then we'll tie back to the angels. What's an interesting metaphor? The metaphor would be, let's say you have a 2-year-old child, and the 2-year-old child says, could you please come and play with me in the sandbox? And you say, yeah, I'm going to play with you. I'm going to play with you in the sandbox. So you come play in the sandbox. Now, you have some sort of game, and the castle broke. You're building castles, and the castle's broke. I ask you a question, do you care that the castle broke? So the answer is, of course not. You're an adult. You understand that there are things that matter, and you understand that a breaking castle doesn't matter. You don't care. It's not only okay, it's not on your radar, it's a non-issue. On the other hand, part of you wants to care because it matters to the child. And if you want to have a relationship with the child, then what matters to the child has to matter to you. So you put yourself in a place where I am affected by the breaking castle. And if you don't, you're not having a proper relationship with your child, right? So here's an example with even a human being. Part of you is removed. You don't care about this issue. Part of you is invested. And with God, it's the same way, but many times, but in other words, that's a metaphor for the way it is with God. Part of God says this whole enterprise called world doesn't matter because it's all insignificant. Because the only thing that's significant is the creative force, is the infinity of God. Creation is insignificant compared to God. That is one perspective. On the other perspective, God says, I want a relationship. Let's play in the sandbox. To do so, the game has to matter. To do so, God has to be invested to the point that if we're not happy, he's not happy. So does God care if I'm not happy? The answer is it depends. It's like the parent. Does the parent care if the castle broke? Part of it doesn't care, part of it does care. So this is a big concept. Once we understand this, we'll take Alejandro's question, then we'll go to going back to the angels, going back to the different groups of the angels. Whatever we don't finish today, we'll tie up next week. Go ahead, Alejandro.
Yeah, it's as far as I know from the linguistic perspective, kind of values, the basic definition of what's important to you. Yeah. So if you think about when you're a teenager, or when you are in your 20s, 30s, 40s, life teaches you, you grow, you evolve. So I understand that basically maybe your core values of being a good person or believing in God don't change, but the word values itself, right, of course, they change in time. And actually, you expect that the wiser you get, the older you get, you learn from all the lessons, you actually start getting the value of the real important things. So I didn't get that part where you said that values don't change.
Yeah. I apologize. I should have said morality. In other words, your morals don't change. In other words, there's a certain bedrock of something that you believe is true, not because it makes sense to you, not because it makes you feel good, but because this is the morality. This is what's right, right? Okay. If I wake up in the morning and I say, robbing a bank feels good. Okay, hopefully the fact that it feels good to me, and I now value the cash that's sitting in the safe of the bank, hopefully that's not going to change my morality. In other words, every person has to have a basis, a foundation that's an anchor. And the purpose of an anchor is that it doesn't change. Yeah, but that wasn't my main point. That was just for entertainment. My main point was that God says, right, all morality is anchored. Morality is anchored in something above us. And what's that? In God. And God says, my morality doesn't change. And that's the constant. It will always be the same. It's not like I wake up and say, maybe today murder is fine. Maybe, right? No, morality is not designed by people. It wasn't created by people. It was created by an objective source that's above us. And that objective reality that it's above us, you can otherwise known as God, says this is a bedrock, this doesn't change. So that's what it means God doesn't change. What we added is the Kabbalistic interpretation is not only does God not change his morality, but God doesn't change in the sense that the universe doesn't affect him, because he is infinite, we're finite. It doesn't really matter. Like if you're walking down the street and there's a colony of ants and one ant is not happy, does that affect you? No, it's insignificant. On the other hand, if you're a scientist and you really want to learn about the ants and you take out your magnifying glass and you take a peek, and you get emotionally connected to one. And if they have a bad day, you have a bad day, yeah, you could be affected. You could choose to be affected. And what we're saying is God does both simultaneously. Just like the metaphor where you could be in the sandbox, and do you care about the fact that the castle broke? You do and you don't simultaneously. Depends which part of you we're talking about. And what we're saying is that God's interaction with the universe is the same thing. The infinite light of God, the world doesn't. We're not a speck. We're not a speck on the radar. We're completely insignificant. But then there's a part of reality where we're created only because God tailors His energy to us, and God gives it to us because God wants us to look the way we do and be the way we are. Each creation has its own properties because the light that it gets from God is tailored to create those properties. In that sense, that's like the soul creating the body. That's a relationship where, like any relationship, a relationship means we're interdependent. If I'm in a relationship with you and I say, I'm in a relationship with you, I had a great day, you had a horrible day, but I'm still happy. What does that mean? It means you don't care about the other person. To affect, you have to be affected, right? Like there's two types of teachers. One type of teacher comes, gives us lecture, doesn't care if people understand, doesn't know if they even understand his language. That's light. Then you have being enclosed. I know the person I'm talking to. I know the level of understanding. I tailor the message to them. It's a different experience, right? So God is having both, but God has both of those experiences simultaneously. Okay, if there's any questions on this, I would love to hear. Don't be shy, because if you're shy, we're not going to be able to benefit fully. So if you want to share, you can share. Otherwise, we're going to come full circle and start talking about the angels and what they say and what their awareness is, and more importantly, us. So what do we start? We start, the angels say, holy, holy, holy. Holy, we said earlier, holy means separate and apart, removed, designated. When the angels say that God is holy, what they're saying is God is completely removed from existence as we know it, because God is not changed by the universe, because the universe is insignificant. In our language, when we say in the Shema, we cover our eyes and we say, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one." The Lord is one, according to the Kabbalah, means that there's only one existence, there's only God. What about me? What about you? What about the planets? What about 7 billion people? What about the millions of galaxies, trillions of galaxies? It's insignificant. It's compared to God, it's like one drop in the bucket, one speck of dust compared to the sun. In other words, compared to the infinity of God, all of creation is insignificant. That is what the word holy means. God is removed, he's apart, he's not affected because he's infinite and we're finite. The angels, at least the first group of angels that we're going to describe, experience that awareness. From their perspective, they understand, they have an awareness where they see that all of the world is completely insignificant compared to the truth, which is the infinity of God. Now, if you had that awareness, what would you be? You would be all burning up. That's why they're called srafim. The word srafim comes from the word lisrof, to burn. They have a tremendous yearning and passion to escape the confines of reality as we know it and connect to the only true thing that matters, which is the infinity of God. So they're not trying to live on this earth. They're not trying to enhance their own existence. They're trying to escape their existence. And they have a tremendous passion to do so, because what do they sense? They sense that God is holy, that God is removed, and God is separate because God is unaffected, because God is infinite, we're finite, and finite the finite existence is insignificant compared to God. And that is the first group of angels. That's that first awareness. And what we're going to say, and what's fascinating is that the reason why we include this in our prayer is because that's the first step of our spiritual journey. In our own spiritual journey, we also want to cultivate that awareness because that is true. There's a certain truth to that. From one perspective, the world is insignificant because the world is finite. Creation is finite and God is infinite, and therefore we're insignificant. And therefore, the only thing that what we should value, as Alejandro says, value is what's important to us, what should be important to us. If we're listening to the song of the angels and we have that awareness, then what's important to us is that we should be able to have that desire and recognition that the entire world is insignificant. We want only to connect to the true value, which is the infinity of God. And that creates a yearning to escape, a yearning to transcend. And that's step number one. That's the srafim, that's the people who get all burnt up. Now, we're not going to do all three, but I'm not going to leave you here. We go next to the next group. The next group says, holy, holy, which means they recognize that there are two types of holiness. And after they have this great desire to escape and to come close to God and to escape the confines of reality, they also realize that God actually can be found in this world. Because even though you're right, the infinity, compared to the infinity of God, the world is insignificant, but there is a ray of God that's invested within every creation. And therefore, you actually can have a relationship with God within this physical world by sanctifying and revealing the spark that's in every creation. And that's actually a step beyond the first group, because the first group are just too involved in the infinity. All they see, they're burning, they're fire. They want to escape. That's the imagery of fire, just surging upward. And that's a true perspective, because from the perspective of God, from the perspective of reality, God is infinite, the world is insignificant. That's true. From one perspective, that's true. And if you had that awareness, you have a great desire to connect to the true value, which is the infinity of God. But then the second group says, there's more to that. Because in addition to that, the next we have to add something. The add something is that God's holiness could also be found in this world, because God is not only transcendent, but God is also immanent. And therefore, when we read the Shema, the first thing we do is we cover our eyes and we say the Lord is one. And again, in the Kabbalistic interpretation, what that means is everything else is insignificant except for Hashem. And all of creation is insignificant. And why do we cover our eyes? Because we want to feel that, because our perspective is not that. That's the perspective of the angels. Then we uncover our eyes, and what do we say? Okay, so first we say we should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, right? Because if you sense that God is the only significant thing, your entire might will be dedicated to trying to connect to God. Okay. What do you say after that in that same paragraph? Then you say, and these words which I command you today, the words of the Torah, should be with you when you walk on the road, when you lie down, when you get up, when you sit in your home, when you go outside. What is it telling you? You recognize that there's also a relationship with God to be had within the physical world. That after you have a desire to escape, you also have a desire to come back. And that's the second group that says, holy, holy. There's two dimensions to the holiness. God is removed, but God is also present. God is like, the world is insignificant to him, but on the other hand, or from the perspective of the ray of God, it's like the soul enters the body, where the soul is connected to the body and the soul is fused with the body. And we have both of those things, and both of those things are true. Okay, so we'll stop here for today. In other words, we'll stop the presenting of the concepts. It's 11 o'clock. I'll take a minute or two for summary, quick summary, and then maybe questions, and then maybe some ramifications, at least some thoughts of some ramifications, which you can free to accept or reject. Everything I said till now is founded on the Kabbalah. What I'm going to say after this is my own thoughts. Take it or leave it. But just to summarize, what do we say? We say angels are a certain spiritual awareness. We talk about the awareness of the angels because we want to implement it in our spiritual journey. And we get into the different songs of the different angels because we want to cultivate all those perspectives. And we began by talking about holy, because that's the Isaiah says, and that's what the prayers say, holy, holy, holy. And we're saying it's actually three groups of saying holy. But what is holy? Holy means the recognition that God is removed. God is infinite, we're finite. There's no emotional connection between the two. This physical world and the entire physical universe, even though it's so vast, is like a speck of dust compared to God. It's completely insignificant. There's nothing to value here. There's nothing to value here compared to the essence of God. And the angels the first group of angels have that feeling, have that awareness, and therefore their emotions correspond in that same way. They're burning up to connect to God. Fine. Why are we talking about it? We want to cultivate some of that. We want to say, in some perspective, everything we want in this physical world, all the even our own experiencing our own our own existence is really insignificant compared to the essence of God. What is really valuable is just connection to the essence of God. And that's the first level of awareness. Second level of awareness, even though the first one is true, it's not the full story. God is like the parent who doesn't care about the castle in the sandbox, but on the other hand, does care about the sandbox, right? Does invest him or herself into the relationship with the child and is affected and moved by what's happening with this child and what's happening with creation. And therefore, God actually could be found within creation. And every creation has a spark of God tailored to it. And both are true, and both are true simultaneously. And we want to connect to both those levels. So that's the story in short. That's the summary. We'll take a question or two, and then we'll see if there's any ramifications that we want to talk about. Before that, we'll have to decide if we want it on the camera or off the camera, on the recording or off the recording. But that's another story. Go ahead, Vicky.
Well, maybe you say first what you wanted to say, and then I ask the question.
I'm just this thing percolates in my mind. I don't know if it's true or not true, but I'm just saying, in addition to the spiritual connection to God, what is the ramification between my own life? In other words, practically speaking, everything I said is practical, but if you want to apply it to other areas of life as well, the model of being removed and being present together. And I think about this because if you have children, you're going to think about this, right? What do they say? They say you're only as happy as your least happy child, right? So in other words, the problem with the relationship is that it's all encompassing. It pulls you in. And if the other person is affected, you're also affected. So what should I do? Not care? If I don't care, there's not a relationship, right? So what am I supposed to do? How to balance relationships? So it could be, I'm just thinking about this, you tell me if you like it or you don't like it, you think about it, that's the homework for you. It could be that what we're saying is that even in human relationships, we could do both simultaneously, right? Maybe my kid came home on a hard day, maybe part of me has to be removed. And because part of me is removed, not affected, that's why the part of me that is affected and does feel the pain and does get involved emotionally will also be able to raise the child up. Because if I'm brought down, sometimes the child is so, as a teacher, we were counselors in camp and the kid has a problem and the parent calls you up screaming and the parent is so upset that the parent is not being rational, right? The parent is not helping the situation because the parent is so emotionally invested, which is a beautiful thing. But the question is, could we do both? Could we have God's model of, on one hand, I'm removed, on the other hand, I'm invested? Because if I'm only invested, I'm only affected, then maybe I can't raise the child. And the same thing would be other forms of relationships. It's not just within people, also to things, to ideas. I'm so invested in my job. And that's good because if I'm not going to be successful. But could I still maintain a sense of independence, emotional independence from the roller coaster of the job? In other words, from the twists and turns, from the successes and the failures. And if I don't care about, if I'm not emotionally connected, I won't be successful. But if I'm too emotionally connected, I'm also won't be successful, right? So could I have this model? Maybe this model works not only with our relationship with God, but also with relationship with everything we care about. Could I be both removed and invested simultaneously? Maybe that's the healthiest model. So that's just something to think about. I'm not putting it out here as a teaching of the Kabbalah or a absolute fact, just something to contemplate and think about. Okay, Vicky, go ahead.
I just want to thank you for that comment. I think it's absolutely beautiful, and I totally agree. And it's a very deep and very good idea to apply to all kinds of relationships, especially in parenting. But yeah, so thank you very much for that. I don't know, it is rooted in Kabbalah, but it is very deep and practical. But my question was about the second group of angels that we're trying to model it from. What are their names? The first was Seraphim, and the second was?
So in the prayer book, we say Chayot, there's basically three. There's Seraphim, there's Ophanim, and there's Chayot HaKodesh. So next week, we'll get into the specifics of the three groups because the third group has to add over the second group. There's more to say. So I didn't want to get too technical now for this week because it's already 11:06. But there are other names that we say in the prayer. Is Seraphim is the ones who get burnt up, and then it's Chayot HaKodesh, the holy animals. Animals represent emotion because a human being the quality of the human being is be able to think abstractly, but emotion is more dominant within the angels than the human being. We can elaborate upon that. So they're called holy animals. And then there's the ofanim. Ofanim literally means the wheels of the divine chariot. We could talk about that as well, but it means the more practically based angels. And that's why it's like a wheel. It's more like a tool. But we'll talk about everything on one foot. We'll talk about that next week. That's why we have 2 weeks.
Thank you. I also had another couple of questions. The second question was about the vision of Isaiah, because the angels that he saw, he also saw God, but was he human? Because God said, no human can see me and live.
Oh, very good, very good. I didn't want to get into that too specific, but in short, there's a verse that says, the verse that we quoted says, he says, Seraphim stood above him. Angels stood above God, which is a big problem because creations can't stand above God, right? Now, when you say above, it doesn't mean like you're thinking about, oh, God is sitting on the throne and there are angels above him. That would make sense, but we're talking about spirituality. So it's not geographical. It's not one is physically higher. So when you say something is higher than somebody else, it means it's spiritually higher. It's on a higher level. So how could the angels be above God? So that's the problem with this verse, and that's why the discourse that we're based on asked this question. And in short, what it says is that in this context, when it says God, what is it referring to? It's referring to the Shekhinah. It's referring to the ray of God that creates, that is invested within creation. And when you say that Seraphim stand above God, where you stand means where do you want to be? Because the Baal Shem Tov taught that you are where you want to be. Seraphim don't want to deal with God sitting on a throne. Sitting on a throne means you're invested within the world. They want to go to the infinity of God. So they're above God, but doesn't mean God. It means
I made a good decision. They keep improving.
So I don't know if that clarifies a little bit, but let me just see. Oh, I know what I have to do.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Rabbi Feldman.
So you see what I'm saying? I'm saying that you can't be above God. What was your original question? The original question was they saw God. Oh, so could Isaiah see God? No, Isaiah can't see God. But Isaiah can experience that there is godliness in the world. Because I'm looking out my window now and I see a tree. And if I see a leaf. And I know that there's life within this leaf. I can't see it, but I see its effect, right? So when he says, I see the Lord sitting on the throne, what he's really saying is, I see the divine energy invested within the creation. And I see the angels, the Seraphim, don't care about that. They say, we're not interested in the limited light of God that's within the tree. We want infinity of God. And compared to the infinity of God, all of this is meaningless. So we're burning up, we're trying to escape. And the second group says, take it easy. Because yes, that's true. God is removed, but God is also immanent. God is also present. And we're supposed to go through this whole emotional roller coaster when we're praying because we're doing the same thing. We want to cultivate and say on one perspective, everything we value, like Alejandro said, the things we want that we care about, in some sense is actually insignificant. On the other hand, they're significant because God could be found here. So when I have what I need, I could connect to the spark of God that's within every creation. And both are true. And if you have to have a full perspective, you have to experience both of those elements.
Thank you. Thank you,
Rabbi.
Thank you. Wonderful day, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank
you. Be well.
Thank you so
I also